Hi everyone, it's Sandy and today I'm doing my March wrap-up. I had a much better reading month in March than I did in February. This month I read 7 books and 3 novellas. The first book that I read this month is The Imposter Queen by Sarah Fine. This book follows a 16-year-old girl named Ellie and she is supposed to succeed the queen. The queen has fire and ice magic that allows her to serve her people, and when the queen dies, her magic is supposed to get transferred into Ellie. But when the queen does die, the magic transfer does not happen, and that causes a lot of problems. I haven't heard many people talk about this book on BookTube, but I really enjoyed it. This book contains elements that I love finding in books such as magic, wonderful characters, and intriguing plots. Ellie was a great main character. She's very tough, very likable, and her sense of dedication to protecting others and her kingdom really does shine throughout the novel. I really love seeing her handle everything that was thrown at her within the first 100 to 150 pages. Her life has completely changed and I was just constantly rooting for her along the way. She's not a reckless character and she doesn't just jump into things without thinking it through. And I think it's really cool that she's not the chosen one, but she does have an important role to play. The magic in this world only revolves around fire and ice, and I really liked that the author decided to focus on those two. There are different aspects to those powers, and I really liked seeing how it played out throughout the story. As a fantasy book, I thought it was simple enough to understand the world and the magic system, but at the same time, it brought its own uniqueness and complexity to it. Sarah Fine does include subtle hints about Ellie's sexuality, and I like that, but I wish it was explored further. Overall, I thought this book had a really good balance of action and build-up, and I really loved the pacing of it. I would rate this book a 4 or maybe a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend it. The next book that I read is Stars Above by Marissa Meyer. This is the novella bind-up collection of the novellas in the Lunar Chronicles. Overall, I really enjoyed most of the novellas in this collection. My least favorite is The Little Android. I honestly didn't care about that character, and I just really loved all the other novellas that include characters we already know and love, and it was really interesting to read about their past before the whole series has started. And then there's one novella that happened after the series has ended, which was really cute. Overall, I give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Novellas really aren't my thing, but I really enjoyed most of the novellas, so that's really awesome because I do really love the Lunar Chronicles. The next book that I read is one of my favorites, and that is Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in the Dark Artifices, and it takes place 5 years after the ending of City of Heavenly Fire. I do have a review and discussion on this book, so if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts, then go check it out. The first half of that video is non-spoiler and the second half does contain spoilers. I love this book. I love how Cassandra Clare can do so much with the Shadowhunter world, and I love how diverse the characters in her books are. I give this book a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is An Unquiet Mind by Kay Redfield Jamison, and this is a book that I read for my psychology class. This book follows a psychologist who suffers from bipolar disorder, and I thought it was really interesting. My main problem that I had with this book is that the author would talk about one thing that would really catch my interest, but then she would talk about something else, and then I'm just like, wait, but what about this thing that you were just talking about? I wanted to know more about that, and it happened a lot in this book, which I didn't like. So this book did leave me with a lot of unanswered questions, and overall I give it a 3 out of 5 stars. I think it was a really interesting thing that the author was a psychologist and she suffered with bipolar disorder, so it was interesting to see her mindset and her thought process. I still think she included a lot of other things that I didn't think were completely necessary to include. It felt like didn't really relate to the story. It was about her, but it really wasn't about her journey, I guess. The next book that I read is Glass Sword by Victoria Aveyard, and this is the second book in the Red Queen series. Despite the mixed reviews on the first book, I personally really enjoyed it, so I had to continue the series. When I first picked this book up, it did take me a while to get into the story because I just felt really disconnected from the world and the characters. Once I got about halfway through, the story did start to pick up and get a lot more interesting. I really loved the different types of powers that were introduced in this book and seeing how it all played out. I really liked the main mission of this book. Although I didn't enjoy it as much as I did with the first book, I still think it was a pretty good read. There are a lot of repetitive phrases in this book that I got pretty annoyed about, and those phrases are basically like rise, red as the dawn, and anyone can betray anyone. I got kind of sick of that, like, okay, I don't need to hear about that anymore. This book did get very intense at the end, and it was kind of sad too. This is a 4-book series, so I'm really interested to see where the story ends up going. I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is Soundless by Richelle Mead. This book follows our main character Faye, who lives in a village where everyone is deaf, so they all communicate through sign language, and one day Faye miraculously gets her hearing back. I love Richelle Mead. I love her Vampire Academy and Bloodline series, and I really didn't have high expectations going into this book because this book has received a lot of mixed reviews. Overall, I ended up not enjoying this book as much as I wanted to. It's definitely interesting to read a book where everyone is deaf and seeing how they all communicate with one another, but there were times in this book where it just didn't feel like everyone was deaf. All of the dialogue were italicized to show that they were signing with one another, but it just, I don't know, it didn't really make a big difference. This book was inspired by Chinese folklore, and I was really expecting to see a lot more Chinese culture in this book, and I really didn't see that. The only Chinese aspects about this book are the names of the characters. If the names of the characters were changed, the story could have taken place anywhere. I couldn't connect to any of the characters, and sometimes that's not a problem at all. Faye was a pretty brave and admirable character at time, but there wasn't anything about her personality or her actions that made her special or stick out to me. I also didn't like the romance. Those two characters, they do have a bit of history, but it just didn't feel believable. It didn't feel real. I didn't care if they ended up together. I didn't care if they didn't end up together. This is a standalone fantasy book, but the fantasy aspect of it doesn't come into play until like the last 30 pages or so. This book lacked world building and the ending was really rushed, so I ended up rating it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read is Silence by Shusaku Endo. I'm most likely pronouncing the author's name wrong, but this is a book that I read for my theology class and I don't want to talk about it, so I'm not going to talk about it, but I did want to mention that I did read this book. When I say I don't want to talk about it, it's not because I didn't enjoy it, it's just that I really don't know what to say. The 3 novellas that I read are novellas from Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy by Cassandra Clare, and they are The Lost Herondale, The Fiery Trial, and Born to Endless Night. And if you read those novellas, you are probably aware that the novellas are out of order, and that's because I read The Fiery Trial and Born to Endless Night before reading Lady Midnight, because I've heard that those are the 2 novellas that you should read before that book. And after I read Lady Midnight, I picked up The Lost Herondale because there is kind of like a reference in that book, so I wanted to know more about it. And I really wish that I read all of the novellas from Tale from the Shadowhunter Academy before reading Lady Midnight, but unfortunately I didn't. I still really loved Lady Midnight, and I will be continuing on with the novellas soon. I don't know how to rate novellas, but I did really enjoy the novellas that I read, so I guess 4 stars. I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but I feel like it's so weird giving a novella 5 stars. So I just usually give it like a 4 stars if I did really enjoy it. Those are all the books that I read in March. If you have read any of these books, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!